Hi, I'm Mary Robinette Kowal, author and narrator of the Hugo, Locus, and Nebula award-winning Lady Astronaut series and The Spare Man, which just came out this year, and narrator of dozens of other audiobooks on Audible. And today I'm here with one of my friends who is also one of my favorite actors and narrators, Wil Wheaton, to talk about our audiobook performance styles and more. Wil is the narrator of The Martian, Ready Player One, Red Shirts, and countless other fan favorites, including his own book, Still Just a Geek, which released earlier this year. Let's get into it.
This is that awkward moment where I'm like, I have this list of things I want to talk to you about. And if we were just kind of like, like if we were like sitting down, in a place where we would normally be, right? It would just
Right.
be like, so I was wondering, let's talk about this.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm actually just going to go straight to my questions
Great.
and blow through this part where I feel awkward. Um,
Fantastic.
you
I
and
will I
I,
will join you on the awkward channel.
outstanding. We both have an acting background. We both
Mm-hmm.
have a theater and performance background. And I don't know how that is common knowledge for me. I've been on TV for 30 years. I don't know if that is common knowledge for people who listen to your books and are familiar with your work. I'm not talking about your super fans. Your super fans know, of course, but I'm thinking about people who are like, oh, wow, I heard about that book, or I've seen that on the shelf. I You do this thing that is so freaking cool that is part of your acting performing background, and I just wanted you to talk about it a little bit because I believe that your particular experience, which I'm going to let you reveal, is especially relevant to character creation for audiobooks. So however you want to talk about that, let's go.
So, thank you for talking about that. Yeah, most people know me as an author, but I spent 20 plus years as a professional puppeteer. And I describe audiobooks as being like puppetry, but without the pain. Because puppets are, it's like puppetry is still acting, but it is acting in weird yoga positions, holding weights with your
Right.
face pressed way too close to other cast members' body parts. And
And if
audiobooks,
anyone wants to know what that looks like, just go look at photographs from the set of like Sesame Street from the 70s, which, as I remember, it was kind of a stinky era anyway. And you
yeah.
see people really crammed together in very tight spaces. And you've done that.
Yes, yes. Have you performed with puppets? Like acted again opposite them?
I have worked with puppets, not in like a fun Muppet kind of way, but in sort of like this is a terrifying creature in the sci-fi story
Right.
you're running away from sort of way.
Yeah,
I have
yeah.
always wanted to work with like the Muppets. I did a photo shoot with the pigs in space when I was like 16 or something like that. It was really fun. But
You know,
and I've been to the set, but I've never actually performed with puppets. So there are I could talk only about you being a puppeteer and we'll get through this very quickly, but there are, as I understand it, two primary pieces to controlling a puppet, right? There's
mm,
the person who is kind of like the primary puppeteer. They're working the mouth, they generally are doing the dialogue, and they're kind of like bringing life into that yarn, right? And then
right.
there is another puppeteer who is working, like, as I understand it, the hands or like the appendages or the tentacles. And I've heard you call that right-handing something. Am I correct on
That's
that?
correct.
Um,
Yeah.
so I just because I think this is really interesting, and then we'll go back to book stuff. Just talk about that for a quick second.
Sure.
What
So
that
most
means, like what the relationship is between those two performers bringing a single thing to life.
yeah, it's one of my favorite pieces of the art, actually. So most of my career was doing stage puppetry, where it was a solo puppeteer, and then you would have a right hand or a second. Um, for my television puppetry, I was mostly doing right handing, which means that the lead puppeteer is performing, and my job is to literally be the puppet's right hand. Like I've been Oscar the Grouch's right hand.
That's
Um,
pretty cool.
um, it's one of my favorite things that I ever got to do. But the job is to for you both to be thinking with the same brain.
Okay.
And on a good day, it is the closest I've ever come to telepathy. Some of my favorite things have been stage shows where I'm right-handing or I have a second, something goes wrong, and we react as if it's a single character. That's what you're looking for, and so it involves having the same understanding of the character as the lead actor. Sometimes you talk ahead about, oh, I want to do this or this, but for the most part, my job is to make it effortless for the lead puppeteer.
Do you find when you are working like that and you hit that moment, I would compare that, in my experience, I would compare it to being in an amazing improv show where
Yeah.
you are so connected to each other. You almost know where the person is going before they go there. And then when the show is over, it's been an amazing show that the audience will never forget. And I cannot remember a single thing that happened on stage because I was so attuned to the actual moment. Does that happen when you're in that stage environment as well?
Yeah. So the interesting thing when you're doing video puppetry is that you're not watching the figure. You're
Oh, of
watching a
course,
monitor.
a little more. Yeah,
So everything else on the set drops away. You just
yeah.
exist in that frame. And the way I sometimes think about it is like there's five basic types of puppets. One
Uh-huh.
of them is moving mouth, and then another is screen or shadow puppetry. And with a
Hmm.
shadow puppet, the thing that you're manipulating is the image that's on the screen. And with video puppets, it's the same thing. The object that's on my hand is actually the control mechanism for the thing that's happening on screen.
Oh, that's
So,
so interesting.
yeah,
I get that.
because you can. Yeah, because we don't have depth perception. So when two actors are looking at each other on stage, you're 100% making eye contact.
Yeah.
Puppets, first of all, their eyes are ping pong balls, so they literally cannot see each other. And second, you can be offset by this much, and on screen, it still looks like you're looking at each other. So
Oh, that's
everything is just about what's in that box.
so working within those, I love working within creative constraints. I find that
Mm.
it inspires me to take chances that I wouldn't normally take. It inspires me to just really commit to like kind of the box that we are working in. I want to take that idea of creative constraints and let's take this and move it into audiobook narrating and audiobook performing. So, um, as actors and as performers, stage performers particularly, we lean very heavily on our bodies and our body language and the physical piece of our performance instrument to do those things with very subtle looks and leans and physical intentions. And we don't get to do that as audiobook narrators. It is 100% in the voice. When it is time to bring the kind of performance that would be very physical on stage to life in an audiobook, these can be different kinds of scenes, right? An intense argument, like a love scene or intense action moments, things like that. You don't get to use your body at all. You only use your voice.
Until you asked me that, I did not think about a distinct advantage that I have as a professional puppeteer because all of my training is to neutralize this.
Yeah, that makes sense. Right, you get your
Yeah,
body out of the way and you just put the performance into where it's happening, right?
yeah, because and frequently also on stage, in stage puppetry, I'm also often visible, and so I try to turn my body off as much as possible, so it's just all of the puppet, which means I had to learn to be emotive without betraying it, without letting my body do it. Yeah, it's the way I describe puppetry sometimes is that my job is to take the semantic components, the body language we do naturally, break it into its
Yeah,
semantic components,
yeah.
reconstruct it in an inanimate object, and I think I'm doing that with my voice too. I just didn't think about it in those terms until now.
It's interesting how there are these sort of like common pieces down toward the base of performing. that
Hmm.
that manage to be load bearing pillars in whatever form of performance it happens to be. And I am thinking about how we as performers use our bodies to make the performance happen. I work as a voice actor in animation a lot, and there tend to be we tend to break down into two groups of people. There are those of us who stand up while
Hmm.
we are while we're performing, and then there are actors who sit down while they are performing. Some of the
Interesting.
best, most diverse range voice actors I know sit down. I can't. I'm a stander. If I sit, I lose all my energy. I cannot connect to the character. What's real interesting to me is that in audiobook narrating, it is more about the endurance and
Hmm.
not, and not getting tired. So obviously I sit in the booth when I'm doing that. But when I am in the booth, I am aware of myself moving my body around and changing my posture, especially in dialogue scenes, heavy dialogue scenes. Um, I find myself moving to like let that character live in my body from line to line. Do you do something like that? I see you nodding, so I'm guessing you do.
I do. I will. It's still more constrained than it would be when I'm on my feet or but it is very much like some characters. It's not just the physicality of the like I move my hands to remind
Right.
myself to have. It's not just that, but also like I'll change my relationship to the mic uh,
Yes.
and and um, and the posture that I have for that particular character.
Yeah.
Uh, there, we call it zero position in puppetry. It's
Uh huh.
the position that the character returns to in between motions.
When you have put a character into a particular physicality, even if it has been, I don't know, a year since you did that character, you find that if you put yourself in that character's body, that they come back to you immediately, like they never left.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. So let me
Doesn't
ask a
that
question.
feel like doesn't that feel like the coolest trick?
It
To
it,
me, it
it is
feels like it's like pulling a thing out of a bag of holding. Like, oh, by
right.
the way, here's Kiva Lagos. I never put her down. She's been in my pocket all of this time. Is there a character that you've gotten to take through a series that you have felt like, oh wow, this character's they're all special, but this one, like, I love it. I just,
Yeah. I one of the characters that I do in the October Day series for Shauna McGuire is
yeah,
uh is the Lushak, and I both love and regret choices that I made.
I know
Because
that.
she's the sea witch. And so she's always talking like this, which was
Yeah.
great for the first when she was introduced. I for reasons I had to record the books out of sequence, so I recorded the second book first,
Uh huh.
and she just appears in this brief
Oh, I
scene,
know how this story
and
ends.
her voice is described as like gravel, the waves going over gravel, and she's terrifying. And the
Yeah.
rest of the series, and it's like 16 books, she monologues. And that was my voice choice.
Um, I have started asking authors, and John and I do this really well. Do you have an intention for this? How do you hear this character?
Yep.
And how do you feel about me interpreting this character in this particular way? Okay. This is a thing that happens when we bring a voice to someone else's creation. I feel like it's a collaboration. I want to shout out my absolute favorite director in the business, Gabrielle DeCure, who directed me in for Still Just a Geek. We have won Audies together. We've like topped the New York Times list together. The collaboration is extremely important to me. The share the willingness and almost the pledge to reach into each other's creative selves and pull stuff out to bring this entire thing together. When we're doing someone else's work, that has a real particular kind of set of constraints that
Hmm.
there's a level of respect and we don't want to overstep. But when we're doing our own work, It's different.
Yes.
It is a little bit more challenging for me to stay out of my way when I'm doing my own work because part of me wants to rewrite while I'm doing it. And
Um,
I'm just like, dude, you did that for a year. Just read the thing. What
yeah.
are your thoughts and experiences on that?
It's the same, and I was going to say, Will, you did rewrite yours because I have both the physical copy and the audiobook of Still Just a Geek, and
Yeah,
what I love is that you footnote your footnotes, and then you do special audio only footnotes to your footnoted footnotes.
yeah.
Um,
So yeah, it does. It gets, I try to describe the audio version of Still Just a Geek to people, which is an annotated memoir. And there was some question about like, are we going to be able to, how are we going to communicate to a listener when a footnote is? And I was like, well, just like the way you talk to somebody when you're like, actually. And I just kind of tried to do that. And because I was the author, and I think because it's a memoir, and the
yeah,
idea of the audiobook of the memoir is we're sitting down having a coffee together and I'm telling you my story. That's what I want the experience to be like, which is real different from you're in a chair and I've got the book and I am taking you into this other world, right? It's like
yeah,
completely different experiences. Um, and when I had the opportunity, because I'm telling my story, to share a thing that I remembered that I had forgotten about, I just said, I didn't even ask permission. I was just like,
yeah,
I'm going to do this. And Gabrielle said, yeah, I think this is a really good idea.
yeah.
But when you
No,
do your work, like when you did Spareman, did you are
mhm.
you do you stay with you have to stay with the text, right? I mean, you've worked so hard and you've worked like with like everyone thinks it's just the author, and all of us who do this know it's not. There's all these people who help us get it there.
Yeah, yeah. So I am very fortunate in that Audible lets me record my books at a different point in the process than I record everybody else's. So
Okay.
most of the time when I'm recording a book, I am recording, the finished page proofs. And I get to record my books from the first pass page proof. So the first time it's been typeset, that's the one we record from. Because I don't know if you've noticed this. I think all of us noticed this. It doesn't matter how many times a thing has been proofread, there you always find a mistake in it.
Every time.
Every time.
Every time.
Like I'm like reading somebody else's work and I'm like, oh, honey, I'm so sorry that this is in your book. And
There's
sometimes
typos in
you,
mine, and every time I see it, I'm just like, "Ugh."
ah, yeah, yeah. Um, so the thing that happens for me is that because I record it at the first pass, I can put all of those changes into the finished book.
Oh, nice. So it's almost like
Yeah.
you're like sort of like you're like parallel stacking your proofing process.
Yeah,
That's
yeah,
really
exactly,
cool. Well
exactly.
done. Well done. That's
And
really,
yeah,
it's
yeah.
very
So I
high
read.
level nerd of you.
Well, yes, it is. I actually wind up reading my books aloud twice because after I finish writing it, I I do a what I call a language pass. So I've
Uh-huh.
done my edit of the structural thing, and then I read it aloud as if I'm narrating it. I catch things. First of all, there's the mistakes, but also I'll
Right.
catch things like, oh, the rhythms for this character's speech are totally wrong.
Yeah.
This is or who thought that these words should go next to each other?
Oh, it was me.
Let
It
me
was me 4 months ago who thought
yeah,
those words should go next to each other. Oh, I
d-
got to talk to that guy. I got to give that guy some notes. I got
yeah.
to help him.
Does narrator Will hate author Will as much as narrator Mary Robinette hates author Mary Robinette?
You know, not no. I mean, I wish I could say that I did because like it's a good bit, but honestly, like listen, not to make this super dark, but like I spent so much of my life, which is like heavily defined by living with PTSD. I've
Yeah.
spent so much of that life just reacting to everything that like at 50 years old, I am ready to celebrate myself. I'm ready
Mm,
to I'm ready to like be a cheerleader for myself in a way that I never was before. So
Yeah.
every now and then I get to a place with my own work where I just feel like, oh, I wish I could go back and redo this. Wait a minute, I can. And then I've reworked it a little bit. Because the majority of my work, it's all self-published stuff. So I kind of have the last word on that.
Yeah. Yeah, for
Uh,
me,
yeah,
I fully what you're saying about celebrating, absolutely. Like I actually I like my own stories.
yeah,
The part where the narrator is just like, "Really? Really?" It's like, "Do you
yeah,
really need a character to be speaking Icelandic right now?
right,
Really?
right.
That was what your choice was? Really?
Yeah.
This character is just gonna trot out a line of Portuguese? Sure, let's do
I'm
that."
telling you, if Tolkien had to narrate his books, he would not have written all those songs.
Did you know
Pages and pages of songs. No way.
I beg to differ because there is audio recording of Tolkien reading.
Then I take it all back.
Yeah,
I take it
yeah.
all back with
That's how he
incredible,
sold the book.
deep apologies. Um, uh, I presume that as an audiobook narrator, you are also an audiobook consumer. Am I correct?
That is correct.
Uh, do you listen when you are listening to audiobooks? Do you find that there is part of you that's taking notes to inform your future performances?
Yes, absolutely. Especially especially when I'm listening to someone who is doing uh really good cross-gender voicing
Hmm.
because it's so hard to do
Hmm.
without coming off as a stereotype.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, there's Christine Pham is like mind blowing. Her narration, like the first book of that I listened to hers, I was just like, I don't. You're I what how what is can I? This is just because it sounded like a full cast.
Yeah. That's
Um,
amazing.
yeah, but then there are also narrators like honestly, when I'm listening to you, one of the things that I'm reminded of is that I can like the emotional investment that you put into the narration between the characters is
Hmm.
just it's really intimate. Like
Hmm.
it feels like someone is talking to me. And some narrators feel like someone is reading to me. And I find that as a listener that I want to be I want someone to tell me a story.
I am so particular about how I listen to books. Um, there are, I'm going to leave this really broad and nebulous and not specific. There are a couple of things where I've been so excited about the material, but the approach of the narrator, I cannot get intimate with it, and it makes it impossible for me. Conversely, there are stories where I'm like, I don't know. I mean, I guess like the primary narrative is okay or whatever, but I could listen to this person talk forever and ever and ever and ever.
Yeah.
And I'm like, and I'm crazy about those sorts of things. Do you find when you are listening to an audiobook that are you able to keep your concentration on the story, or do you find yourself like playing the what if this happened game? That's the thing that happens to me a lot as an author. Like I'm listening to a thing and I realize, oh, for the last 3 minutes, I took a thing that happened in this narrative and I have been wondering if I could take that and turn it into my own story. Does that ever happen to you?
Sometimes it's what's more common for me is that they'll say something that I'll be hearing something and it will suddenly unlock a problem that I've been dealing with in one of my own plots.
Oh, I love that. Yeah,
And
that's
then I'm
great.
like, "What? Wait, wait."
Like,
And usually when that happens, I'm like, "Okay, this is the time that we stop listening to the audiobook and we come back to it later."
Mary Robinette, I love you as an author. I have had just the greatest time watching you do puppeteering. This is where I confess that I can't listen to my friends narrate audiobooks because it feels intimate and weird to me. It feels super weird and super uncomfortable in a way that watching my friends on stage does not. And I don't know why it is. It's something weird. It is a switch that is turned in my brain that I have absolutely no control over. So I cannot tell you, oh, I enjoyed that you did this, or I experienced you doing that. It's not you. It's literally all of my friends. I can't do it. It makes me so uncomfortable. All of that said, having watched you do all these other types of performance and being aware of you as an artist, there is no doubt in my mind that you are as accomplished as I imagine you are. And I was wondering if you have ever gotten any particular feedback from your listeners that was meaningful to you in a way that you might want to call out in this moment.
Um, Actually, yeah. I mean, I know that we're not supposed to say things like, um, hey, my family member said this or that. My brother also cannot listen to me narrate. Um, but my dad was listening to the Calculating Stars, and he gave me the best compliment that I think I've ever gotten, which is that he said he forgot it was me.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
There's other people watching, listening, who are also nodding. We're all part of that same thing. That's amazing. Congratulations. That's a big
Thanks.
deal. That's a
Yeah.
super duper deal.
Yeah. From listeners, it's from people that I don't know. Um, the the things that they talk about that I'm just you know those moments when you're performing and particularly in front of a live audience and you're like, yes. It's just and so there are things where I'm like, oh, I'm going to wreck them with this particular moment. And then having them come up later, it's like, you wrecked me. And I was like, God, yes, yes.
I want to just take this tiny moment to tell everyone who is watching this how intensely grateful I am to you for your participation in my process as a writer. I'm a better writer because you've given me time. You've given me feedback on some of my fiction, and you've been an early reader for me, and it's been really awesome. And I mention this because I just want you to receive some accolades in public for just being a cool, gentle, kind, generous, helpful friend in person, but also because I want other people to know that no one does any of this alone. There is this thing that a lot of creative people, especially young creative people who haven't really gone into the scary, is someone going to accept my words or pictures or whatever part of our existence? I just want them to know, I want everybody to know, even Hugo Locus Nebula award winning authors such as yourself, our friend John Scalzi, and so many of our peers and contemporaries, we all lean on each other
Yeah.
and we all help and support each other. And we are all kind of part of like a community, right?
Yeah.
A little behind the scenes community. Um, and I want people listening to this and seeing this to know that I am on the New York Times bestseller list in no small part because you helped me get there. And I want to
Oh,
thank you for that in a super, super, super public way so that everybody knows that.
thank you, Will.
That is important to me.
But I mean, my feeling is, and I told you this at the time, that you are a natural storyteller. Um, and it happens on the page and it happens with your voice. It happens anytime you are just present. And you are like the warmest, most genuine person that I've ever hung out with. No offense to any of my other friends. But like the thing that I love when we were talking about your book, the thing that I love about it is that you're one of those people that you can just ask a question and you're like and then I can sit back and watch you unlock things in your own head and go, oh, and then you execute. It's like it does not take much. It's mostly just the have you thought about? Yeah, you're and I love I like I do like listening to my friends narrate. And so I
That
have been, yeah, it has been, you have been my companion on many a difficult trip. You're my comfort listen when I'm having a rough
oh,
time. You're the one that the audiobook that I fire up.
I love that I get to be there for you like that. That's really cool.
Yeah,
I didn't know
yeah,
that.
yeah,
That's really super great. Thank you for that.
yeah.
Um, Before we go, let's talk about the spare man. This is like
Okay.
the whole reason that so we're having this wonderful, really to me extremely interesting conversation about what it means to work on audiobooks. And I feel like we could talk about this for another 2 hours and not repeat ourselves once.
Right.
But you have a book out. You have a brand new book out. And I know that you can write the coolest stuff in the world, and unless people know about it, it doesn't matter. So let's tell people about The Spare Man. I'm about halfway through it. I'm really loving it. I absolutely love these two characters and their relationships and their voices. And I really like, I don't know, these are people I enjoy being around as you're doing this. It's really, really fun. What do you want to say about this for people who are maybe just hearing about it for the first time, or people who have heard about it and just want to know, like, they just need that little nudge to go ahead and click buy?
So it's the Thin Man in Space for people who've seen the films. Basically, happily married couple solving crime on a luxury cruise ship, going between the Earth and Mars with their adorable small dog. The dog lives because I'm not a monster. It is witty banter and murder all the way across.
It's so fun, like that, just that comparison to The Third Man. Like, it's just that snappy 1940s dialogue that I love so much. That's so much fun. Like, you just hear Gloria Swanson just cracking on dudes with like that dialogue. It's really fun, and I am extremely confident that it will be beloved,
Oh,
as it absolutely deserves to be. Tell people where they can get it, even though we all know.
so my book and Will's are available on audible.com in audio. And I'm just going to say again how much I uh, still just a geek. Would you like to tell people about your book, Will? Because it is phenomenal. And I've
Oh,
already said it's just like sitting down with my friend to hear him tell me stories about his life. But
when I was in my late 20s, I was about 28. I wrote. I felt all this pressure to write a memoir, even though I didn't feel that I had lived enough or had enough experience to like fill up a memoir. But I've been writing a blog for a while at a time when that was new and novel, and it felt to me, I got a lot of external pressure from people in my life that the next logical step was write a book. And I wasn't ready to write a book, but I did it anyway. And it didn't get noticed. People who read it liked it, but it very much flew under the radar. Let's fast forward roughly, like, what is that, 18 years or something like that. I'm so bad at math. I'm 50, so do it. My editor got in touch with my agent and said I had read Just a Geek, and I think that Will could revisit this, look at it through the eyes of a 50-year-old man looking back at a 28-year-old like giant child, and annotate it and revisit it and recontextualize it and retell that story. And the way that I've been describing it when I did all the press for it was very much like I had written this first draft that kind of sat around for 20 years, and then I went and looked at it again and could really see the story that I was trying to tell that I didn't know I was trying to tell back then. And Still Just a Geek lets me tell that story. It is a memoir about surviving child abuse, child exploitation, living with mental illness and chronic post-traumatic stress disorder. It is about becoming a stepfather and refusing to let choices that were made for me without my consent as a child define my possibilities, opportunities, and right to happiness as an adult. And I'm real proud of it, and I've gotten a lot of really lovely feedback from people on it. I'm just insanely grateful that that people respond to it. And to everyone who has shared this work with me and sees a little bit of themselves reflected in some of the things that I went through, I'm really sorry. I see you. Just want you to know that you are enough.
Yeah, you are absolutely enough. One of the things that I talk about with first person narration when I'm teaching writing is that uh, the there's a trick that first person can do that none of the other voices can, which is that the narrator can change through the act of telling the story. And that
Uh-huh.
is one of the things that I love most about Still Just a Geek, and especially the audio of it, is that I can hear your growth.
The
Um,
audio experience was really interesting for me when I wrote, when I did all the writing of all of this. It was hard. I had to go back
mm,
and revisit the single most traumatizing event in my entire life, something that will haunt me until the day I die. And it was really hard. I actually uncovered a lot of repressed trauma that I'm now working through because
yeah.
I need to do that. And when I finished writing it, I felt re traumatized. I didn't feel cathartic at all. When I did the audiobook, that catharsis I had hoped for in the writing happened. And um, and it's interesting to me. I have thought about the act of speaking and activating the body and feeling the
Yeah.
resonance of my voice in my chest. It is, I'm an artist, right? So I cannot help but think of things in terms of metaphor and imagery and things like that. And I could very much feel my body processing and like kind of healing and kind of accepting things as I gave literal voice to a younger version of myself who was silenced by abuse.
Oh, that's
And
so beautiful.
I didn't expect it. I really
Yeah.
didn't expect it. And it was really powerful. And there were times where I had to ask Gabrielle, my director, was that okay? Was it too raw? Was that too much? Because I don't know.
Yeah.
And one of the reasons I insisted in my contract with my publisher that she direct me was that we've worked together for 12 years or something like that. And I knew I could trust her. And I just want to tell everybody who is listening to this, if you care about audiobooks and you care about these stories and you care about the quality of the performances, I really want you to support authors who say, listen, I really need this director, rather than a publisher who says, we have a big stable of directors and we'll just pick one to get you through it. That's really not how this works. This is very much a creative collaboration. And there needs to be a level of trust and communication and unspoken communication between a writer and a director, and between a narrator and a director. And when we are able to find that person who is our Rick Rubin, right? Or like our Dr. Dre, like when we find that person who like makes us the best that we can possibly be, it is so foolish for publishers to save a few bucks by pushing us into somebody who we've never worked with before. And lots of you in the audience don't know this is going on. This is a huge thing that is happening in our industry
Yeah.
right now, and it is threatening the future of our industry. And if you care about these things, please, as consumers, just pay attention, okay? Please pay attention. And when we say like, listen, we're really doing our best to give you what what you've come to expect from us, it would be terrific if you had our backs, if and when push comes to shove.
Yeah. I have a my engineer is an engineer director. His name's Andrew Twiss. I have recorded like I could work more if I did self-engineered or
Sure.
um But when I record with Andrew, I have 13, 25 pickups afterwards.
Yeah.
I just self engineered a book and I had 317. Um,
Oh man. Oh,
oh, it was
oh.
brutal.
I just feel the muscle in my back just thinking about that.
It's the I'm like, oh, this is why I don't self engineer. And I know that there are all narrators who do, and they've got it down, and they are phenomenal, phenomenal narrators. But I also know that having that second set of ears, someone who can say, is that the way you want to read that?
Yeah. Have
And
you
just
thought about?
push. Have you thought
Yeah.
about? Yeah,
Yeah.
it makes
What if
all the
what if
difference
we
in the world.
tried? Blah, 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 blah. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
And I love that. And I love working with someone who I trust enough that I feel like I absolutely love the freedom. And I do this in animation a lot, where I will ask the director, can I just be really stupid? Can I just be like, can I just, may I attempt this performance in a way that is so ridiculous and so big and so extra that I know what that feels like. So when I'm doing it appropriately, it doesn't feel like too much.
yeah,
Um, for me as a person, being told my whole life, you're too much, you're too sensitive, you're too this, you're whatever, it's really normal for me to feel like, gosh, I'm probably too much. But sometimes a performance really calls for you to be too much, and it's easy to forget that. It's so great to work with people that I trust, that I feel really safe and comfortable with, where I could just be like, hey, if I did this big dumb, like I made a bunch of fart noises, what about that? Like I guess you can try that, right?
yeah.
And it's good. There's so much that goes on in this process that never lands on the other side of the curtain.
No, and that's a very good thing. I one of the things that I post, I ask authors, um, would you like a blooper reel?
Yeah.
And when it's an author that I know socially or have had a good rapport with when I'm getting there, getting notes before I start performing.
Yeah.
And I don't think that people understand how many times, like, there's always like one sentence in a book that is impossible to say. And and you look at it and like, why is this the hard one? Why is this one hard? And so there's like 15 takes of it. Ridiculous.
Have you had the experience of reading a sentence several times and whoever's listening to you keeps stopping you because you're saying the wrong word, yet your brain insists that you are, in fact, saying the word that's on the page? But
Yes.
it turns out that that is not the word that's coming out of your mouth at all, and you don't know it.
Yes. Yes. Oh, yes. That happens more often than I would like.
It's weird, right? It doesn't make a lot of sense. Like, I
No,
don't know what's
no.
happening. I don't, it is in those moments that I am reminded that what I think of as myself is a couple of pounds of whatever is inside my skull. And the rest of me just kind of exists to move that little thing around the world so it can like experience stuff. And sometimes it just doesn't show up the way that it is supposed to. And
Yeah.
we don't know why.
Yeah. There's a thing that I had heard about from other narrators who have, hundreds of audiobooks to their name, that
Mhm.
I would hit a point where it became so natural to me that I would fall asleep while narrating. And I was like, that's not a real thing that happens. And then I fell asleep while narrating. And it wasn't Yeah, yeah. I was like, how does this I became aware that my eyes were closed, and it wasn't that the book I need to be very clear, even though I'm not talking about what the book was. It wasn't that the book was boring. It
Right.
actually was the thing that told me that I needed to get reading glasses because I was having eye strain and my eyes were just like, we're just gonna check out now and shut. And I became aware that I was still talking and no longer looking at the page.
That's amazing. The
Yeah, I
closest
don't
I
think
have come to falling asleep would be hitting a section, and I know this. I know that this has happened at least once. I was doing a book for Cory Doctorow, and there was a section of the book that Corey told me afterward, oh yeah, I wrote this because I knew you were going to narrate it, and I just thought it would be hilarious to make you do this. He
Is this
makes
the
me
pie?
recite pi to like 100 and something digits. It's ridiculous. It's like nearly half a page of numbers, and I was like, for real? And he was like, yeah. So I think, all right, I can't just read off a string of numbers. The listener's going to completely check out. I have to put this to like music. I have to
Mm.
find like, I got to modulate all these numbers. So I did. So I kind of sing my way ish through however many digits of pi. And more than once, I got down to like the last 15 numbers and stumbled. And it is not something where you can pick it up. It absolutely has to be a one take move.
Oh, that hurts.
By the time I finally got it, I wasn't in my head anymore. By
Yeah.
the time I got it, by the time it came up, I was just like, it was like I had grabbed those numbers by the tail and just held on as hard as I could and hoped they didn't throw me loose. And I still don't remember reading them. There's a recording, and it's very funny. You talked about blooper reels. Corey asked my permission, and I was like, absolutely. And he released the blooper reel of me just messing up horribly. And it's really funny.
That's
It is
fun.
a lot of hard work. This thing that we do, and it is tiring. I don't know if a person who doesn't do it fully appreciates the physical demands of talking for 5 to 6 hours at a time and performing 5 to 6 hours at a time. I feel like it's so easy to dismiss it as you're sitting down reading, but you're really not.
Yeah.
There's like, I do you notice that muscle tension in different parts of your body? And it's almost like, have you
Mhm.
ever come out of the booth after a day of recording and you're physically exhausted, like you just
Oh,
walked
yeah.
around Disneyland all day? Like,
Yes.
I had a great time, but I am wrecked.
Yeah. Yeah. I will schedule a massage for myself at the end of a book, but I can't do it mid-book because it will change the way my voice sounds.
Yeah.
Ooh, would you like a piece of really fun, uh, weird, weird audiobook narrator trivia? And not, I don't even.
Yes.
So I had. This is the kind of minutia that we're talking about in terms of things you can hear and you don't expect to be able to. I had a deviated septum, and so
Me
when
too.
I hey, so when I narrated my book Ghost Talkers, I had the surgery scheduled.
Mhm.
And I was like, okay, so I'm going to record it. And then I need to get the fixes back before this date because then I'm going in and I don't know what my voice is going to sound like.
Sure.
Um, and the reason that I knew that is that when I went in to have the conversation with my surgeon, and he's like, and you should be able to return to work, 3 or 4 days afterwards. And I was like, okay, so just to check, I'm an audiobook narrator, and you could see him just like fling a mental script out, and he's like, okay, wait, we have to have an entirely different conversation now
Yeah.
because I do not know
Absolutely.
what your voice will sound like after this surgery. It may not
Yeah.
be shifted at all. It may be radically different, and
Right.
there's no way to tell you.
Yeah.
Um, but we did that, and unfortunately, because of timing, the fixes did not get to me before I went into the booth went under the knife. So we had to push them 6 weeks out. And when I got into the booth, same exact booth, same engineer, same mic, and he's like, "It sounds like you're in a different room."
Oh, wow.
So we had to do all of this modulating in order to make my voice sound like I was in the original room, which was the same room,
Right.
but
Sure.
because it was resonating differently. And the narration was fine, but I had to relearn how to do all of the character voices because all of
Interesting.
the things that I knew about where to pitch my resonance, like my resonators were just fundamentally working differently. It
Yeah.
was fascinating.
After I had mine, I had a supremely deviated septum and chronic allergic rhinitis because I had sinus polyps. I had everything all cut out. It was a major operation.
Mm.
And my doctor said, do not be surprised if your voice is more resonant after this is over because I've opened up your skull a little bit. And I was like, I mean, that's, could we not talk about
Phrase-
that? Like opening up my skull? Because my skull feels like a thing that generally should remain closed.
Yeah, yeah.
But like, okay. I sound the same to myself, so I don't know if it is any different. But listen, if I can just walk around and behave as if I have a deeply resonant Morgan Freeman-esque voice, I am very happy to live in that reality, even if it only exists inside my head.
Well,
Mary Robinette, I feel like we have really come up against it.
oh yes, we have.
You have given me an extraordinary amount of your time today. I've really enjoyed this.
This was so much fun. Thank you, Will, for taking the time to do this.
Yeah, it's such a pleasure. If when we have the opportunity to do this again, I'm super duper into it.
Yeah, likewise. So thank you everyone so much for watching, and you can find my new audiobook, The Spare Man, and dozens of other audiobook performances from me and Wil Wheaton on Audible.